Welcome. I'm David Levi Strauss, chair of the Art Criticism and Writing program here at the School of Visual Arts. I'm not Ramon Fernandez. So, why do we all read Peter Schjeldahl? Well, yes, location. He's always there at the back of the book, beckoning. It's why so many of us read The New Yorker from back to front, because we can't wait. We read him to check ourselves, to compare our responses to his, and to be either confirmed or upset. He's certainly an authority. I mean, someone is writing these things and making the decisions, but he wears his authority like an item of clothing that someone's just handed him, and he might pass it on to you or whoever at any time. This puts him in the position of having to make it up all over again every time. So he approaches any work of art as if he's seen the work of art for the first time, fresh, in an unauthorized way. This is exciting to a reader. He wears his breadth of knowledge and concern for the big questions about art and life lightly, and tosses off insights as if they were free and available to all. There's a politics in that. But I think it's primarily something else that makes us all read him. I think it's the appeal of a real sensibility condensed into sentences and phrases that give pleasure in their enactment and decisiveness in an otherwise confused and confusing position, being before a piece of art today. Like this. Is it just me, or have the old masters got younger lately? Or this on Pipilotti Wrist. Imagine, as Wrist makes easy in the show's main room, being a sheep in a lush meadow entirely surrounded as far as you can see by what you like to eat. Life surely vitiates such sublime contentment most of the time, but numbness to it seems an optional tragedy. Or this, on Martin Ramirez. Art to be recognized as such requires grounding in both individual biography and common culture. What can we do with and about the rush of pleasure and enchantment that the unlicensed genius of a Ramirez affords? I recommend taking it as a lesson in the limits of how we know what we think we know. Unable to regard such works as part of art's history, we may still have it be part of our own. Or this, how good was Picasso? The best anyone could be then, and unlikely to be equaled anytime soon. We read Schjeldahl because he's one of the best there's ever been at making sentences before or after art that detonate behind our eyes. Please welcome Peter Schjeldahl.
Made it. Thank you, Levi. That was great. And happy coolish Thursday night in New York. I've always liked those. When Levi asked me to do this lecture months ago, I said, well, I don't really lecture. I just kind of wing it. But he gave me too much time to think about it, so I started writing things down, and I've been rewriting it constantly ever since. And rewriting for me is a matter of cutting and condensing. So it has reached a state where it's about as light and airy as a cinder block. And really more like a speech than a lecture. I've never understood lectures. Maybe because I'm a college dropout and I slept through most of the ones I went to. It always seemed to me that they're kind of like lectures are combinations of sloppy writing and tight-ass talking, and I can understand writing, I understand talking. So I think this is what I'm going to read, and I'm just going to read it, is more like writing, so it's kind of unfair to talk it. But we will get through it, and then we will have, I hope, questions, comments, a conversation. That's always my favorite part. Of ourselves and of our origins, subjects of art. The lecture's main title will explain itself later. As for subjects of art, I don't know what that means. I had to come up with something quickly, and it sounded cool, and now I hate it. But on to the one-sentence description I was asked to write is a question. At a time when art is being publicly gamed to exhaustion, can we still or again speak sensibly of what we like about it deep down? To which the short answer could be, well, why not? Thank you and good night. But put it this, that was scripted. But put it this way, can we make any significant difference by speaking of what we like about art deep down? A difference in the world, or at least in the art world, or anyway among ourselves, or even only to ourselves in our private thoughts. And furthermore, to do it sensibly, meaning both reasonably and in a way that others can feel. Franz Kafka was asked if he saw any hope. He said, "There is infinite hope, but not for us." The long answer to my question is not really, things being as they are. People talking in public about art today may speak from their bleeding hearts, begging indulgence from their listeners, or else make chess moves with the cliches of some or another academic discourse or prevalent babble, intimidating or benumbing possible dissenters. But it seems to me, and I won't try to prove this, so you'll agree with me or not, it seems to me that our culture's bridges between individual experience and shared meaning are pretty thoroughly blown up. We can look at the river, the current of current things and current events from one side or the other, from the heartfelt or the rational. In between, we're all wet. Some of us try to produce exceptions to the rule, and maybe sometimes we do, but they never seem to catch on or go anywhere. However, we can always do our best with what we've got. I suggest starting with a pronoun that I'm throwing around, we. That's a dicey word in a democracy. It presumes an agreement where none is proven or can be proved without taking a vote. In critical writing, it's a rhetorical stratagem, a seduction with aspects of being a fantasy and a trick. But when a writer gets away with it, that is, when readers don't think to object, it is kind of sublime. It has interesting powers. I'm going to talk about it. Pronouns are the little locomotives of rhetoric. As an I type of writer, I model my experience, inviting you to try it on and see if it makes you feel slim and attractive. I use you a lot, too. Some writers still use the politely formal pronoun one to rope in the reader, but most of us prefer the pushier but bouncier you, at least here in pushy, bouncy America. When a writer folds I into you to make we, he or she projects a world of common values. Call it civil love. You've noticed that I just used the politic he or she. Call that civil justice. The we is make-believe. We, if you'll pardon the expression, do not inhabit a world of civil love. But guess what? We can pretend that we do. A certain educated common sense of the last 3 decades holds that all art is rhetorical and thus a game of pretenses and or of exposing pretenses. This view is basic to the gaming of art. In fact, all art can be seen that way. The theory is easy to learn and apply, but not usefully if anyone's experience matters. It ignores the fact that good art happens to people in ways that knock us out of our educations. Good art evicts intelligence from its left brain command center into other parts of the brain and of the body. It does this by some or another touch or twist of beauty, which can't be conceptualized but only undergone, like a beneficent seizure. However, all art criticism tagging along behind art inevitably runs on pronoun-driven fantasy. That's the fun of it. The seriousness of it, as of art, is the misery that engulfs most of the non-art, non-make-believe, actual world most of the time. Art criticism, like art, should furnish something more and better than we can expect from life without it. What might that be? Henry James isn't among my favorite authors. I like his brother William a lot more. But I think of a mysterious short story by Henry with a wonderful title, The Great Good Place. An overburdened man is somehow transported to an unremarkable and even rather dull but friendly hotel or club, a bit monastery-like, at an unknown location. It refreshes him. His life back home improves. Was it a dream? That's not clear in the story. It doesn't matter. I love that phrase, the great good place. I think everyone has one. Yours is tailored to your particular sorrows and contradictions, which it soothes and resolves, and mine to mine, which it soothes and resolves. The humor and the wisdom of James's story is that the protagonist's haven has nothing in common with an Eden or a utopia, nothing orgiastic or exalting. No dreams come true there. That's in the nature of great good places, I think. They are not projections of our wishes. They are registrations, perhaps quite humble, of what we lack. They aren't exciting. They are, however, greatly good. Every religion propagates a corporate great good place, open to all by means of special avowals and rituals. If you're irreligious, you don't escape wanting that. Only your want tends to be lonesome and blind. So maybe you end up in the art world. There is no shortage of lonesome wanters around here. We are not exactly lost sheep, because probably we ran away from our original flocks on purpose. But you can hear the bleating in every bar and Starbucks in town, not to mention online night and day. You might even become an art critic who hankers to hopscotch from an I and a you to a we on the occasion of some perhaps shareable epiphany. The sound of a we can be that of somebody's great good place bubbling to the surface. There it may display a pleasing iridescence before, very quickly, it pops and is gone. The we that I envision is not political. All politics mobilizes the word we in tandem with another word, they. It has been said that politics begins with the naming of the enemy, an opposed party, nation, class, tribe, race, religion, sex, age cohort, movement, coterie, or body of opinion. Politics feeds on identities. Identities start fights, whether we assume them ourselves or impute them to others. Assuming and imputing are the same move, logically. To say that I'm such and such has no meaning unless somebody else is so and so. Maybe we get along and maybe we don't. If we get along, it's often because both our groups agree in hating another group. Naming the enemy isn't just the start of politics, it's the daily drill. Identities jam signals from the great good place. They forestall the best kinds of art and writing. Gertrude Stein wrote a terrific essay on this point, What Are Masterpieces? She said roughly that art's ideal, its spiritual engine, is entity, something that exists not in relation to anything, but as its own sole thing. Entity occurs, she said in 4 words, verbatim, while identity is not. If any we could form around that occurrence, it would be one that likewise stood on its own with no corresponding they. I am here to say that there does occur such a we. I bet you've experienced it, and that probably you're not sure what happened when you did. It's kind of crazy, this we. It is as fleeting and mysterious as certain subatomic particles. Why is that hard to say? Mysterious as certain subatomic particles. Maybe the quantum kind that can be in 2 places at once, I read somewhere. Like I really understand that. Now I'm throwing around another pronoun, it, indicating something that is not a you or an I, but that might indicate personhood or anything else, anything at all, that is taken to be real, including unreality. Itness is what we want, if we want masterpieces. I expect arguments against my disparagement of politics in art. The arguments will prevail. I will surrender if they make it a matter of politics being more important than art. In fact, a moment's thought will confirm that most things in life are more important than art. Art is only and merely wonderful, sublime, terrific, joyous, useless. Months ago, when I was asked to give this lecture, Levy asked me, I immediately decided that I would key it to a reading of Wallace Stevens's The Idea of Order at Key West, a great old modernist warhorse of a poem that was written in 1934. I didn't know why. A friend of mine said that the idea reminded him of the Andy Kaufman stand-up routine where Kaufman reads aloud at a hilarious length from Ernest Hemingway in the persona of a nerdy immigrant kid who has just been turned on to literature. That made me mad and embarrassed. But then I thought, hey, I'm that kid. Who isn't that kid if a lover of any art? I also thought of my hero Charles Baudelaire more than 150 years ago, advising everybody to always be drunk. Drunk, he said, quote, on wine, on poetry, or on virtue, as you prefer. Wine is dangerous to some of us, and I, for one, live in terror of people who are drunk on virtue. That leaves poetry. Besides, it's nice in a lecture on art to have an actual great work of art at hand to remind us what we're talking about, if we're talking about anything. So here's one. The Idea of Order at Key West. The occasion for it, if you don't know the poem, is the speaker and somebody else that he's talking to hear a young woman or girl walking on the beach singing. That's really all you need to know. She sang beyond the genius of the sea. The water never formed to mind or voice, like a body, holy body, fluttering its empty sleeves. And yet its mimic motion made constant cry, caused constantly a cry that was not ours, although we understood inhuman of the veritable ocean. The sea was not a mask, no more was she. In other words, we're not talking symbols here. The ocean is the ocean. Doesn't stand for anything, and she's a real girl, okay? The sea was not a mask, no more was she. The song and water were not medleyed sound, even if what she sang was what she heard, since what she sang was uttered word by word. It may be that in all her phrases stirred the grinding water and the gasping wind, but it was she and not the sea we heard. For she was the maker of the song she sang. The ever-hooded, tragic-gestured sea was merely a place by which she walked to sing. Whose spirit is this, we said, because we knew. It was the spirit that we sought and knew that we should ask this often as she sang. If it was only the dark voice of the sea that rose or even colored by many waves, if it was only the outer voice of sky and cloud, of the sunken coral water-walled, however clear, it would have been deep air, the heaving speech of air, a summer sound repeated in a summer without end, and sound alone. But it was more than that, more even than her voice and ours among the meaningless plungings of water and the wind, theatrical distances, bronze shadows heaped on high horizons, mountainous atmospheres of sky and sea. It was her voice that made the sky acutest at its vanishing. She measured to the hour its solitude. She was the single artificer of the world in which she sang, and when she sang, the sea, whatever self it had, became the self that was her song, for she was the maker. Then we, as we beheld her striding there alone, knew that there never was a world for her, except the one she sang and singing made. Ramon Fernandez, tell me if you know. Why? When the singing ended and we turned toward the town, tell why the glassy lights, the lights in the fishing boats at anchor there, as the night descended, tilting in the air, mastered the night and portioned out the sea, fixing emblazoned zones and fiery poles, arranging, deepening, enchanting night. Oh, blessed rage for order, pale Ramon. The maker's rage to order words of the sea, words of the fragrant portals, dimly starred, and of ourselves and of our origins, in ghostlier demarcations, keener sounds. Not bad. Let's see. I think it's safe to say that nothing in recent writing or art reaches that level of beauty and intelligence so confidently, let alone with such total mastery of form. Iambic pentameter laced with dactyls, a la the Iliad and the Odyssey, and intricate webs of rhyme, but almost conversational in tone. I wish that more artists and writers were still or again actively envious of greats like Stevens, but it seems the creative envy at that altitude is beyond anybody's capacity now. Artists and writers are not at fault. You can't play a hand of cards that history hasn't dealt. Stevens, like his contemporaries William Carlos Williams and Hart Crane and Marianne Moore, was dealt kings and aces, an imperative to Americanize modernity and to modernize Americanness, full blast, right away. Abstract expressionism and then pop art did that with painting, and jazz and blues, and then rock and roll did it with music. Watershed moments like those don't happen very often. Lots and lots of good art is being made today. It's just not good for an awful lot that matters in the reality-altering way that great art seems to. This is even more the case with criticism. The present sheer quantity of smart art writing is unusual in my lifetime. But similarly, the writing is not smart about very much. Critics now are good at answers. We're just short of good questions. This is a matter of how the world is. The world isn't raising questions in forms that individuals can very well lay hold of. We might conclude that the world hates individuals, but that would be to flatter ourselves. The world doesn't care. I would like to be proved wrong tomorrow when I come across a new writing that is brilliant in itself, compelling in its comprehension of our lives in common, and suggestive of fruitful attitudes and actions, a game changer. But I won't bet on it. Our part of the world is droopy these days, isn't it? Prevalent are moods of frustration, senses of insufficiency, and piled up disappointments. The worst thing about this is that it conduces to despair, which conduces to bullshit. Bullshit is a time-honored way of filling voids of meaning and of getting by in life by getting over on people, because who cares? I would like to think that some of us care, or at least might act as if we care, and see where that goes. Call it moral make-believe. Make-believe has nothing in common with bullshit, by the way. It requires absolute honesty. Ask any little kid. Here I shift gears from philosophy to rant. You know poetry by how it sounds. You recognize bullshit the same way. Among excellent younger critics now is Ben Davis. He recently diagnosed a telltale language in today's run-of-the-mill art criticism. It's a reflex to characterize and even to congratulate new art in terms of what, and I quote, it is responding to, being interested in themes of, reflecting on, being concerned with, and I would add, interrogating, challenging, subverting, and so on. Mental monkey tricks. And then there's that horrible word. I wince every time I read it, and I read it a lot lately, practice. Artists don't create artworks any longer. They have practices, like dentists, only less honorably, or like musicians trying to get to Carnegie Hall. When do you stop practicing something and do it? These lines of bullshit perform obvious social functions. For example, they posit tidy professional communities, identities based on job descriptions, in which everybody is busy with his or her little practice or with commenting on each other's practices in little ways. Cynicism has gone so far as to come back around as weird innocence. Nobody here but us practitioners. Pity us. Invite us to your parties. Hire us. Extend our grants. Give us a kiss. Amidst the industrious hum and chatter, it's unlikely that anyone contemplates someone singing by an ocean, unless during a rock concert at the Jersey Shore. Not that there's anything wrong with that. That didn't work. To beat up on a specific example, we live in the age of an educational abomination from hell, the artist's statement. An artist's statement is a clump of required thinking which purports to be about the inspired doing of something, but which replaces it. The art-schooled arts world is mad for intellectual hooks. These leapfrog from an idea, sail clear over the sweat and bother of actual creation, and land in forensic analysis, which some dismal pictures or objects have been ginned up to illustrate. A hook may get you into the art game. It will also digest you. You will then be excreted out as best as fertilizer for next year's crop of artist statements. More likely, you will have been just another silly fart dispersed on the breeze. That worked. Attention, artists. You don't have to say what your art means or even is about. Furthermore, don't do that. It's my job. You make the stuff, let critics talk about it. Making is superior to talking, so you have the better end of the deal. I try to be big about that. For your part, keep your eye on the ball, which is not a ball of talk. Because this is SVA, most of you are artists or friends or lovers or family of artists, or teachers and critics, or perhaps poets, or otherwise involved. Most of you are on the young side. The future is yours. I'm on the old side and running out of future. This slackens my interest in what's new. When I go to look at art for pleasure now, it's to the Met or the Frick. My we is yellowing around the edges. Any we that has near-term potential must be one that tastes right in your mouths when you say the word. To conclude on the main point, ourselves and our origins, the origins of a we that is worth some dedicated pretending. I am not speaking for artists here. Any artist who makes a difference constellates a we but doesn't belong to one, except in the occasional lightning strike way that I've argued for. He or she skips past personal pronouns to itness, to entity. A test of success in a work, a test of success of a work in the mind of the artist who has created it is that it feels strange. It is a new fact in the world whose value, if any, other people will decide. Perhaps they will still be deciding when the artist is dead. I saw recently where Bob Dylan was buttonholed by a fan who enthused, "You changed my life." Dylan said, "What the fuck am I supposed to do about it?" That was bad manners. It wouldn't kill Bob Dylan to say thank you, fake it a little, But his point is impeccable. If you're an artist, you don't start the morning by saying to yourself, "Hey, think I'll change some idiot's life today." You work. To be really good at anything, assuming that you're talented, is to work harder and longer with more ruthless honesty and discipline than other people could do without bursting into tears. Your secret is that, hard as it may be, it doesn't feel like work to you. It feels normal, like eating and sleeping. You are not about to hand your own life over to anybody to change or to not change, though you might wish you could. And you positively do not accept responsibility for the lives of your audience. That's not good for them, and it is a day-spoiling pain in the ass for you. So as an artist, you're lonely. You know the fragility and vulnerability of your great good place. but you lean your whole weight into it anyhow. Along with wanting fame and money and sex like everybody, you want to slip that place into the map of the world to make the world a little less wretched to you. Even you'll go without the fame and money and sex parts. If you can only do that, you will be misunderstood often enough by people, darling dumbbells, who praise you. Be kind to them if you can. That's the deal. No one said you were an artist. You said you were an artist. You asked for it. No whining. Thank you.
Okay, when you're writing your column, for the New Yorker, are you thinking of an audience? Are you picking something because the audience should know this, and then you're writing to some fantasy audience, or are you writing for yourself more than for anyone else?
The really cool thing was you say, I'm writing for you, darling. No, I mean, I'm a writer. I mean, writers pretend they have an audience, and then they either do or they don't. I mean, it depends, and you can sort of count. No, it's the audience of the New Yorker. I mean, it's and partly I have an editor. I have an editor who who has a sense of what the New Yorker wants, and work with her. Before I've written for the Times, I wrote a lot for the Village Voice. For the brief, happy 2 years when there was a magazine called 7 Days, in the late '80s, which was really a dream. But and they it's different audiences. I mean, when I wrote for the Voice, I could explain less. I could assume more hipness, in the audience. I find, the New Yorker, I've got to spell things out a little more, but that's any writer. This is kitchen procedure, and also I think, if anything, if people ask me like how, what do I do in my writing? I say, if it's not perfectly obvious, then I've screwed up somehow. I mean, you should be able to just, what I do is what it is, and it's my mother, who's 92, says that she doesn't always understand what I say, but she likes it. So she feels sort of on the margin of the audience. Anyway, I don't know. Yeah.
Do you think there's a way to extract the terminology that you spoke about, that Ben Davis kind of illuminated? Do you think there's a way to get away from that terminology when it's so a part of especially young contemporary art practice?
Well, I don't know what to comment on that. Yeah, no, go ahead. I don't care. No, I don't know. If it's fun and it gets you ahead, well, go ahead.
No, I didn't mean it like that. I meant it's I wonder whose job it is. Is it the writer's job, or is it the whole? I mean, I agree that the terminology.
Well, I don't think it's not a job. See, I mean, when I'm trying to get out of the job model, I mean, we've fallen into a job model where, I think one of the indelible moments in movie history was in Blazing Saddles, where Mel Brooks is threatened by the new sheriff. He's the governor of the territory, and he's surrounded by his cronies, and he says, "Gentlemen, we must protect our phony baloney jobs." And I think most of what happens in the world goes right back to that. Somehow it's like you do something because it's your job, and if you're only doing your job to support your family and everything, then that's great. That's proper. Don't get wrapped up in your job. But when we're talking culture, it really has to do with desire and drive, and lack, and and abundance, and and life experience, and any any language appropriate to the world of jobs is stifling, and also it makes certain kinds of incredibly boring behavior seem normal. The thing is, anybody gets to act the way they want to, but I would rather they were called on their bullshit about it, Oh, grr. Anyway. Yeah.
Peter, you once told me when you actually asked John Ashbery, whom for the longest time managed to write poetry and not criticism at the same
Yeah.
time, and you asked him how he do it, and he said it's like television. There's always something going on.
Yeah.
And it's really two questions. One is that, what did your experience of poet inform how you write criticism,
Your
and
poetry?
and the second question is, Peter, whether you still write poetry.
Well, that was something. I'll repeat that. It's like the most heartbreaking thing. I mean, Ashbery's a genius. He's like the finest manipulator, player with the English language alive. Was asked how he could be so prolific, and he said, "Well, it's like television. There's always something on." And for a poet waiting, months for an inspiration and doing drugs and having, unwise relationships. I mean, that just, hell with it. No, I came, I did drop out of college, and I came east from the Midwest as a newspaper reporter and a poet. And I, landed in New York on the Lower East Side. I had not to this day taken an art course, which, gives me a sense of bravado and defensiveness. I don't know, it's between, in the 60s in New York, all the poets wrote for Art News at a time. That one-sentence reviews. They reviewed every show in town, including vanity galleries. I mean, they stopped at poster shops, okay? So I would write like 30 reviews a month, one sentence. You can conceal your ignorance in one sentence, and $3 a pop, I think, and that was a good wage. I had an apartment on Avenue B, 4 rooms, $40 a month, and 4 burglaries a year. So. That's not a line I'm using for the first time here. Where did this go? Anyway, I was a poet, and I was on that scene. And as people kept asking me to write art criticism, and that gave me little bits of money for it, and I drifted into the art world where the parties were much better, and the poetry scene in the 60s sort of broke up, and I think, the big advantage, the thing I'm most grateful for really was that for the first 10 or 15 years that I was around the art world, I was a nobody. I was Peter the poet. I was doing it to support myself as a poet. It's like, when you're a nobody, by the way, if you think you might become somebody, and we all would like to become somebody, realize that where you are now as not somebody yet is the golden time of your life, because no one has any reason to lie to you. Okay? You hang out, you're just that person. Okay? No, I hung out with artists, drank with artists, slept with artists, and learned a lot. Then at the end, about the end of the 70s, I decided that, that I had been sort of second rate as a critic, and that I wanted to see how well I could do it and let the poetry take care of itself. And the art criticism ate the poetry, and I haven't written any now for, close to 25 years. And, so the world has that many more poems to not, many less poems to not read than it would have if I had continued. Actually, I get a sense that poetry is kind of getting a little traction again. But sure, I mean, my heroes were the poet critics. I mean, it's Baudelaire. He's my big brother. If you have any arguments with me, you're going to have to take it up with him. And Apollinaire, to some extent, Frank O'Hara, very much. But I was in world of actual magazine journalism, and being the art critic on papers and magazines that weren't art publication. I mean, I did all the art magazines too, and I was an editor at Art America for a while. But anyway, I just think I don't know quite what your question was, and I think I've surrounded it, and but we can get back to issues if you want.
I don't know how to form my idea into the question, but you somehow said you're kind of proud of being a college dropout, and you're kind of happy that you didn't take any art courses, blah, blah, blah. What do you think about so-called, now it's kind of like a new phase of young artists trying to get MFA and all those academic institution education? What do you think
Well,
that idea?
I think everybody should drop out. I think the school, burn down the schools.
Okay.
No, I don't know. I mean, the thing is, also it was the '60s, when we were incredibly naive, and when America was like utterly prosperous. The idea that, you'd ever go without a meal, is like, By the way, one of the tricks in the '60s we learned is that the absolutely, definitely sure way to get some money is to wake up in the morning with none. I mean, none. And by the end of the day, there'd be money in your hand. It was amazing. It always happened in different ways. But no, I mean, I educated myself in public, which is a very painful way of being educated. But you remember every lesson. I mean, I like to say that everything I know about art I learned on a deadline. So I mean, in school they screw off the top of your head, they pour stuff in, whether you want it or not, and it's because it's like for a rainy day, something, and then it never rains, it snows. Well, now what are you doing? But as my model of education is more, I'd like to distinguish it from sophistication, which is sophisticated knowledge is knowledge you have at the moment of needing it, of having a use for it, and either because you can summon it out of your memory or you know where to get it, and so there's no extra. I mean, so I started by learning about things sort of by patches, and over the course of, holy smokes, 45 years. The patches kind of fill in and you get a quilt, but there's still some holes in it. But now with Google, that's no problem.
I recently heard Edward Albee speak, and he was talking on creativity.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that he mentioned was, at least for him, for playwriting or his plays in his mind, was order out of chaos. Now, I know that may or may not be different from The Great Good Place, but I have heard this, and I'm wondering if you can speak on order out of chaos. I mean, whether it's chaos of the mind or chaos of the system.
Yeah, order out of chaos. Well, I think actually the model that Wallace Stevens, the idea of order at Key West, is really sort of order in the face of chaos. I mean, that is, he is saying that the ocean is dumb, a body, holy body, fluttering its empty sleeves, great line. But he has these incredible passages where he is acknowledging and addressing the power of the ocean, and it's like, I mean, the sort of pathos of the poem is that the bigger and meaner and more powerful the ocean gets, the more small and delicate becomes this girl singing. But then he weighs them, and she wins. And, you know, go argue with a poem. You know, it's like, by the way, Levi mentioned Ramon Fernandez at the beginning rather mysteriously. That was a little jab at me. We have arguments about various points. Ramon Fernandez was, by the way, for years, I always thought Ramon Fernandez was the name of a fisherman or something, you know, like some sort of grumpy fisherman. But he's actually a major critic of the 20s and 30s, and Spanish, wrote in French, drifted from leftism to fascism, but in whatever position he took, he was extremely determinist, social determinist, and it's Stevens at this moment is sort of aware that that he's in a place which Ramon Fernandez has not dreamed of in his philosophy, you know, so it gives him a little poke. Let's see, what was the question?
Oh, well, I have a question.
Okay.
Do you make any distinction between art criticism and art history?
Oh yeah, art criticism and history, sure. I mean, art history is a real discipline, you know, and it really is. No, I mean, art, you know, oh my God, am I about to call art criticism a practice? It's a line of work. But no, it's, you know, scholarship is, actually I have a very long piece coming out on the New Yorker on Monday, about the Ghent altarpiece of Jan van Eyck in Belgium and a restoration project around it, which involved me, and I couldn't believe I got myself into that. But it was fun. It took a long time to write, and it involved talking to about a dozen different scholars, you know, about incredibly minute points of 15th century art history, you know, and you know, and I think with the aid of the New Yorker checkers, who are just astounding, you know, I don't think they sleep. I think they stay up, you know, wondering about things. But you know, I mean, I think it ends up so that even the scholars will have the illusion that I know what I'm talking about, you know, and but you actually realize every fact in it was checked, you know, and maybe double checked and changed and jiggered. I guess, you know, when I'm arrogant, I think the art historians are working for me. You know, they're doing the research, they're providing the information. Art theorists are working for me. They're providing ideas, which I try to translate into English. And if they make it over, then they're my idea, and if they don't, then they weren't an idea in the first place. Yeah.
Okay, so I'd like you to continue. I mean, my question has to do with this thing you've been talking about with artist practices and with professionalization of the art world. And my question is, the Rob Pruitt Awards, does this reinforce this sort of situation, or does it break down barriers between fine art and pop mass culture?
That's an interesting question.
So which way is it going?
I don't know. I mean, I mean, you know, it's like, the Rob Pruitt Awards, Guggenheim. Anyway, it's like a kind of big carnival charade on, you know, on institutional honors, and it's a party, you know. It's like, and you know, parties. By the way, talk about institutions. You know, I mean, there is no art world without parties. The first art world came after a party, I think. Read Plato's Symposium, you know. It got completely loaded, you know, and so so to that extent, the fact that it's sort of Dionysian, and it's funny, that'd be for that. It also, I don't, I mean, it feels a little complacent to me, it's like, the word cynical, I'm trying not to use it, but but also it's Rob Pruitt, sort of making a position for himself by pretending to a position, by sort of parodying a position and getting a position. I mean, this is gaming, it's gaming, but it's like some games are more fun than others, okay? Russian roulette isn't fun, okay? It's absorbing, it's like, but, so, by the way, I'm not saying that anybody's a bad person because they do any of this stuff, but, consciousness, please people, it's like, know what your choices are making, and know what know what you're scared of, know what you're scared of, it's like, freedom, security, right? We both want both of them in different ratios, and if you, but what a real artist is someone who's going to essentially trade in most security for freedom, because it works better that way. Not because they're better. I mean, they're probably not better. I mean, most of the major artists in history have been flaming assholes, but they didn't ask us to dinner,
It seems like the 800-pound gorilla in the room is quality.
Quality.
Yeah, and in other words, as a critic, you're making a distinction between good and great.
Yeah.
Between what's bullshit and what's straight.
Yeah.
So can you speak to maybe a little more specifically about what you use for that quality?
Quality. Sure. I mean, it's given what something is, it's it's better or worse than something else that's that. I think great art tends to sort of hit us in the head and daze us about it. It's like, because the first thing we'd probably notice about it is what it isn't, like how it disagrees with what we've thought is good, and so great art tends to look ugly and shocking at first. But, well, I have lots of little rules of thumb, and one of the two standards that I operate to the extent that I'm a judge, which I don't enjoy that role very much, but to the extent that that's part of what I do, there's really two criteria. It's like quality and significance. That is, how good is it? What is it good for? How important is it? And they don't always sync. It's like there's kinds of art that I really like and I love to see and I'd love to have, but I don't write about them because there's no particular reason why a reader should share my feeling about it. And then there are things that have great significance. Damien Hirst, okay? I write about Damien Hirst. Can't stand that shit, but some of it's all right. But boy, what a gamer, and but he's very significant. While he is significant, and then at a certain point he won't be anymore. But because the biggest, the surest way to fail, by the way, is to be a really huge success, and then even if you're good, by the way, this is New York. We're always welcoming people coming up, and we keep clearing the top of the mountain by knocking them off after they've been there for a while. So that's efficient. It's it's the jungle. It's cool. So, where do we? I'll let the mic. Raise your hands to the microphone, people.
Oh, I don't know how to say this, but I just want to thank you for validating what I'm feeling about my own art practice. After going to the Abstract Expressionist show, the question is, how to survive as an artist in this atmosphere. you know, after, I feel like I'm in a crisis right now because I feel if I can't write about my art, I
Don't.
I won't.
Why should you write about your art?
I've never written about my art,
Yeah.
but I feel like I'm not. I want to get, you know, I'd like to get a residency, for example, but I've got to write about my art
Okay.
to do it. Or I could just send in a picture. But I feel
Well, I don't know.
I can't
mean, you know,
write. I mean, it's
a-
not my language. My language is visual. So,
yeah.
so
Yeah.
I'm
Well, the thing
really
we live in a
stuck, so-
culture that still, you know, is this has this weird prejudice that identifies intelligence with verbal expression and skill, you know, and math, I guess. Who's good at math? I don't know. But and you know, and that's an error. You know, that's privileging one little area of the brain where I happen to make my living from. So I'm fond of it. But you know, like people, I like the example I use is people. There's lots of jokes about how dancers are dumb, you know, and yeah, well, you get one to dinner, you know, but you know, but you look at a good dancer, and they can have more intelligence in their ankle, you know, than the MIT physics department. I mean, it's like, you know, but we live in a culture that doesn't recognize that. Very few people are visually literate, you know, and certainly literate in painting and sculpture, in like the one-of-a-kind art that requires a lot of leisure to become educated in. So you're up against that, you know, and I can't tell you what to do. You know, I mean, you could. I guess if I thought you would starve to death, I would say, you know, go get that residency. You know, actually, go get that residency anyway. I mean, I think you're gonna. And,
Thank you anyway for your-
you know, it's like, all right, maybe I'm trying to raise our threshold of pain about the choices we're making. Maybe I'm trying to make it hurt a little more. Because, you know, pain is the great motivator, you know, as a lazy narcissist, you know, I know this, is it only the pain of the fear of failure, of missing the deadline, you know, gets me going. So, so I recommend it, you know, try pain. But also, I'd like to raise the sensitivity, the general level of sensitivity to what the real thing in art is like, and lower the tolerance for the other stuff. You know, I don't want to, you know, annihilate anything, but you know, and it's like it's not a bad artist's fault that they're bad. I mean, maybe it is. I don't know.
I was just wondering if you could say something about curatorial work and if you think it's an art form.
What kind of work?
Curatorial work?
Curatorial work? That's a job. It's an important job. Gosh, that's a whole big subject. I mean, there have been times, I think, by the way, I curated a show once, back in, you know, the 70s, and ever since I have had odd respect for mediocre curators. I mean, that is really hard, and in all kinds of ways. I think that, you know, in the 70s, by the way, when the market was flat, whenever the market falters, curators get more powerful, you know, and oh, you said, is it an art? Absolutely not. No. It mustn't be. You know, that is, you can, I mean, you can say, you know, the way you curate is an art. But, you know, but the curator should say, no, never mind. You know, because it's taking your eye off the ball. You know, the curator should not be looking at what they do. They should be doing it with, you know, with the absolute focus on the art, as much focus on the artist as is necessary, depending on how neurotic the artist is, you know, and a focus on the institution and the audience, you know. And no, it's like everybody wants to elevate their job description. You know, that's human, you know, but it's just really a pain in the ass, you know. It's like, and so yeah, no, it's not an art, but you know, but really good curators are just marvelous, you know. I mean, it's like a really marvelous shows. I think Ann Tempkin's show of abstract expressionism at the modern, you know, and you know, it's a lot of people beat it up because this is New York, you know. It's like that's okay, but you know, I think it's great.
I would just like to take strong exception to that, and I'm not a curator, for the following reason, that I would say insofar as criticism is an art, so it's curatorial.
No, it's not.
Just
Yeah.
wait a minute.
Okay.
So is what a curator does is an art, because basically you're saying these things belong together. I have selected A rather than B, and just as you have said, I have chosen to write about this, that, or the other thing. And to some extent, what I remember about your articles is I very rarely remember the arguments you make or the thoughts. But what I take away from them is the passion, the reaction to the beauty of things. You're very like Alex Ross, you know, your colleague in music. And that's what I most love and appreciate about what you do.
That's a compliment. I think he's great. And Joan Ecocella in dance. But no, I mean, anything, you know, there's an art to doing anything well. You know, it's like the art of macrame, okay? You know, and, you know, which if you're into macrame and can tell, you know, grade A from grade B, you know, it's an appropriate reference. You know, I mean, art is one of those honorifics, you know, that we can always throw at anything. You know, it's like, well, what is art? Art is a word. Look it up in the dictionary, okay? You know, and it's always being fiddled with, you know. Well, I mean, when I was, I'm old enough to remember, I'm very old. I'm old enough to remember when, if you said art, you meant painting. Literally, painting, art and painting were interchangeable nouns. If you meant sculpture, you said sculpture. If you meant photography, you said photography. You know, and then that started to slip. And now, you know, through all of the institutional developments and historical developments of the last 40 years, you know, art is now a dotted line in the air. You know, it's like, and something's in it or something's not in it, you know, and it's always subject to negotiation. And it's a zone now. It's kind of a zonal thing. But there's still a boundary, you know, and which, I don't know, we have this perverse wish to somehow erase the boundary or to go back to, you know, when you had to paint, you know, Venus on the half shell, you know, to be an artist. But by the way, my book of theory is the unabridged dictionary. You know, that's you know, just, you know, in moments of confusion, make a distinction. You know, find a distinction. That's William James, by the way. Read William James. He is the philosopher of and for the American mind. He shows you how the American mind works and how it works at its best.
In an introduction to one of your books, you define taste as an accumulation or sedimentation of aesthetic experience, usually those of others. And it's something that sat with me for a while, and I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about
well, the second part is kind of a joke. I was asked what taste is. And I said it's a residue of aesthetic experience, commonly somebody else's. But you know, and I think. And there is that, but it is, and more seriously, I mean, I think taste is a word that has become unpopular for reasons. I mean, partly is because we're Americans, you know, and we're anti-elitist, right? You know, we all want to, you know, you're an elitist. I am not, you know, James, bring the Mercedes around. I mean, it's like, but. You know, but I mean, actually, one critic I know who I think kind of cut the Gordian knot on that. He said, in a democracy, anybody gets to be an elitist. Okay, You know, and certainly art love is an entirely voluntary and self-selected elite. You name yourself a member, no one can throw you out, okay? But taste has its associations with distinction, with bourgeois, you know, sentimentality, whatever. But in fact, it's a real, it names a real function of the mind, of the brain, you know, and it has to do with organizing, with balancing our personalities and around our memories. It's like, I mean, my taste is my sort of, you know, deeply rooted memory of what sort of thing I like and what sort of thing I don't like, you know, so I don't have to be looking at absolutely everything all the time, you know, and you know, I see something and say, ooh, you know, that's what I'm into, but then experience begins. I mean, either, oh, that's better than what I like. That isn't what I like at all. That's something else, you know. I think, by the way, if you see something really new and do not immediately react negatively against it, you're a bullshitter. I mean, that is something new is, in fact, a challenge to the world that you have organized, the sense of the world that is helping you survive. And your first reaction is going to be like a cornered animal, you know, and you know, and that's why, you know, people say, well, I hated that. I said, how long did you stay with it? And, you know, it's like good, legitimate, you know, you're in the game, okay, stick around. You might hate it more, you know, but have another experience, because it would be finally, it can crack the carapace, which then opens up, lets it in, re-knits itself with that, okay? And, you know, and a lot of people stop at a certain point, and it's fine. I mean, a lot of people have a lot more on their minds, you know, than art. I mean, you know, they don't have that leisure. So, I was going to say something else. But, no, but taste is a pragmatic thing, you know, and it's, people who have good taste. I mean, there are people who have educated taste. I mean, there are people who've just simply seen a lot more, you know, and have more refined taste, and you know, and are legitimately deferred to on that subject, not taken as God on the mountain, but deferred to because they have a better information. You know, it's like Pascal said that to lead life properly, we must fear power, respect knowledge, and love charm. And that all the trouble in the world comes from crossing up those wires. If we fear charm or love power, we are on our way to tyranny of one kind or another. Anyway, I'm glad I got Pascal in. But it's a big subject. But again, it's like I'm just trying to free up the words from their association, take them out of these sort of networks of knee-jerk reflex, you know, and that where words are tainted by associations, which you know, it's like nuts. Go to the dictionary, start fresh. You know, what's art? It's a word. What's beauty? It's a word. Beauty means, in the dictionary, remember, a quality present in a thing or a person which causes intense pleasure and deep satisfaction to the mind. Okay? You know, any arguments? I mean, it's like, I know what that is. You know what that is. You've experienced it. You know, maybe it's only a little bit intense, a little bit deep, but, you know, it's like, and it's a word we almost never use incorrectly. You know, we almost never use it incorrectly. You know, it's like, it's a beautiful day. Well, it probably is a very damn beautiful day. You know, it's like, you know, and by the way, I see, you know, like professors on the way to the seminar, you know, beautiful day, sure is. And they get up there and talk about how you can't use beauty in relation to art. You know, it's like, it's just silly. You know, but it's also, there's a fear. There's an organic fear of irrationality, of unreason, of, you know, of emotion, you know, which but universities, universities really should be turning out, engineers and brain surgeons, and they should be turning out people. Okay, William James said you can seek truth or you can avoid error. You cannot do both. Okay, brain surgeons and people who build bridges and people who fly airplanes, you don't want them being truth seekers, right? You want the bridge not to fall down. It's like, okay, and the brain surgeon not to practice tattooing. It's. But the thing is, in art, what's, what do you got to lose? It's like you fuck up, nobody dies. It's, it's like it's insane not to take advantage of the fact that failure is not damaging to anything except your bloody self-esteem, which, may drive you into another line of work. Anyway, don't get me started.
Hi. I wanted to build up a little bit about the question about the curator, because around me, a lot of curators are now talking about their writing. And
About what?
Their own writing, and they define themselves as, there's a new word around me, critter, the critic curator. And
the critic, wait a second, they're defining themselves as critic curators.
Critic curators. And so when you
Do they do windows? I'm sorry.
I totally didn't get that
I'm
joke.
sorry.
But
go on. Yeah, I'm sorry.
just when you were talking about the artist statement and you said leave that to us, to the critics, where does curatorial writing fall in there, and what do you think curators can write if they're so into writing?
I think writing is for curators is. I guess I'm trying to think of a curator who was a great writer. I don't think that there are curators who are very good and clear writers. I think it's kind of instrumental. It's part of the introduction to the. But I think it's really their sensitivity to the art and to the audience and to the institution. It's very unusual that anybody is really good at more than one thing. I think there was the Renaissance. It was like, I guess the Renaissance was probably small enough that it was like a farm where you have to do everything yourself or something. Leonardo, but no, I don't. Again, I have. I don't know. I spent a week in Belgium hanging out with restorers of panel paintings. Of like 600-year-old wood. And boy, I was impressed with them. And panel like restorers are an aristocracy of people that you will never hear of unless they fuck up in a major way. Okay. And I don't think they're probably very well paid. But they, you can you give them the Mona Lisa or a Dürer, or in this case Jan van Eyck, and they pick it up and they feel it, and if necessary they go in with chisels and planes and as delicate as a feather, and ensure their survival. So it's. I guess relative prestige between fields is something I think is just really boring. I think the rating is within the field of who's good, who's better. I think we do rate, we do judge. That's human. That's a survival thing too. And in a democracy, again, that's kind of annoying. But all it gets hurts their feelings, and they recover.
I have a question about criticism. It seems as though it's evolved or devolved into two different camps, and that there's a criticism that really shies away from opinion, and then the other camp of criticism finds it vital to, for lack of a better word, the practice. And I'm wondering what you think criticism should do. Because I know this is a huge argument in the criticism field.
Well, I guess, what I think it should be is what I do. I mean, you know, because otherwise, why would I be doing that? You know, if I always should be doing what I think it should. Anyway, but by the way, I think one of the great essays on criticism was Oscar Wilde's The Critic as Artist, which is he basically says, actually he says a lot of great things. He says, you know, that what he said would, you know, that a man cannot do a thing is precisely what makes him the proper critic of it. That because anyone who does something, first of all, if they do it superbly well, they can't even begin to imagine doing it in any other way than they do it. And I think everybody else is an idiot. You know, that mediocre artists are open-hearted and fair to all their colleagues, you know, because they want everybody to just be a member of the club like they are. You know, that's really human, and you know, and it doesn't hurt anything. But you know, a great and serious artist is going to tiptoe from the room, you know, around that, because well, and you know, there are different kinds of criticism, and academic criticism, which I don't know if it is it qualify as criticism? I guess so. But it's, you know, but you know, I mean, through the 80s and 90s, it was just, you know, absolutely rampant. I mean, you know, the Rosalind Krauss School, and you know, it's which is, and you know, I felt pretty bad because, you know, I was being treated as a water bug. But you know, what could I do? I just keep going. You know, and I think their legacy was a certain heightened level of sophistication in the gaming of art. You know, and I guess if, you know, I'm sick to death of the gaming of art, but if it has to be done, it might as well be done well. You know, you know, I don't think they were idiots. I mean, I think it was a power play. You know, it was like, I mean, you know, but that happened in the 60s was the big thing. I mean, where, you know, I mean, in the 60s when I came, there was a few galleries up on Madison Avenue, a few of them on 57th Street, and that was it. Okay, that was the art world, and then everybody else was downtown in, you know, Coldwater Flats and lofts and bars, and then boom, you know. But and also you know, I mean, first of all, I mean, nobody before, I don't know what the date was, and something would be traced to somewhere, I'd say it was probably somewhere 69, 70, 71. Nobody in the history of humanity went to school to be an art critic. You know, it was really, like it was for me, it was like sort of, you know, stumbling out of, you know, disqualifying myself for every other profession in the world, you know, and, you know, and I tried to quit art criticism in the 70s, and I realized there was nothing else I do well in the world that they pay you for. So, and anyway, I feel incredibly lucky. I mean, you know, it's like, and also it's only, really, in America, only in New York or Los Angeles is it a viable profession. You know, the art worlds are too small, and I like to say that in order to be a full-out critic, you have to be able to make a new enemy every week and never run out of people to be your friend. Okay, so, you know, in St. Louis, you know, it's a month, you know, and then, you know.
It's a kind of twofold question, one leading into another. You mentioned the word beauty and you mentioned the word taste.
Yeah.
When I was very young, I saw Elegy for the Spanish Republic, and I thought it was beautiful. You know, it opened my eyes right away. Very soon after that, I went to a friend of mine's house. Her father was a painter, albeit, as far as I can see now, probably a failed painter. And their new little beagle jumped on my leg while we were sitting at the kitchen table, and I said, "Oh, you're such a beautiful little dog." And her father went nuts on me and told me, "That's a dog, it's not beautiful." Now, you know, my judgment was, as a, I don't know, 14-year-old, was, well, you know, the painting's beautiful, the dog's beautiful, that's my taste.
Well, you're a tough little kid.
My opinion, my taste as well as my opinion. Then when I got older, I was in a dilemma going to see a show of a painter who was getting a lot of notoriety, and I looked at the exhibit. I walked out and I said, "This guy's a total sham." And I read it. One of the rare times I read a review of the show, and the review was very positive. And something happened to me that never happened before. I went back and looked at the show again, and there was a part of me that had been altered dramatically. The taste of the critic seeped into my consciousness and made me very confused. It never happened before. So what I'm asking you as a critic, do you think one of your conscious or unconscious jobs is to help form other people's taste?
It's to get your shit together. Yeah, I think no. I mean that is people are welcome to do it, and that's great. But I mean, I keep the eye on the ball of what I'm doing. You know, like I said, that Bob Dylan thing. You know, I do not. I don't do it to. I'm not responsible for other people's lives. You know, it's like I'm barely responsible for mine. You know, and you know, I like to say, I mean, as minimal as I can make it is, I am making a living by giving people things to read. You know, and that's the focus, and that's the basis of my selection. You know, for what I'm going to write about, basically, what that's on now can I make the best piece of writing out of?
Do you feel you're doing it as subjectively and as objectively as you?
Well, professionally. I mean, you know, it's like I've been doing it a long time, so you know, you get a sense. You know, it's not remarkable. But no, and you know, and it's like, you know, I think is beauty in the mind of in the eye of the beholder. Absolutely, that's where it can do the most good. See, you know, it's like, but it's not only in our eyes, it's in our brains, it's in our guts, it's in our hearts, it's in our, you know, sexual organs. I mean, it's, you know, it's. I mean, I think beauty to me is a physiological event, you know, which just sort of makes me realize that my brain is part of my body. It's like, you know, it's kind of all the splits, you know, you sort of suddenly, and there's kind of a, you know, it's like my shoulders come down. I didn't know they were up. They come down. So it's like. And you know, and people. By the way, it is. I want to take beauty away from art in order to understand it. I mean, it's like I think beauty is a normal physiological function of the human. The only people who don't experience beauty are the people who are clinically depressed. In fact, clinical depression might be defined as an incapacity for experience of beauty, and to the point sometimes where suicide becomes a beautiful idea. The only beautiful idea is for this to stop, is for just all of it to stop. And, you know, it's and people get it from, you know, the action in the movie or from the moonrise over the Walmart parking lot. I mean, it's like, you know, it doesn't have anything to do with art. It's like, and art that sets out to be beautiful is nuts. You know, it's like that's like okay, be really good. You know, I mean, it's you can't do that. But you know, art that works, you know, it always has some tincture of beauty. I mean, there's something which to me is a combination of attraction and pause. It's like there's a force that pulls you towards something and a force that puts you back. It's like reverence. It's like, basically, if I think something is beautiful, it's like I am saying, I want this thing or this person to be the way it is, or she is, or he is right now forever. You know, not to be violated, especially by me. You know, that's like, you know, and that was in the Renaissance, the great Renaissance nudes, you know, are like that to an incredible Titian, you know, where it's like really sexy, but it is not, precisely not an objectification of the woman. It's an attraction and a reverence. And then, by the way, Manet with Olympia, you know, pulled the plug on that forever. I mean, it's like, because I mean, it's like there's the attraction, and you're scared of hell of this woman because she is really tough, and she's looking at you like, you know, so let's go somewhere else.
I got a microphone here.
Yeah.
And you galloped ahead of my comments and questions. I'm in the middle, right here.
Oh.
Right here. Thank you.
Yes.
Hi. You mentioned Rosalind Krauss and that crowd.
Yeah.
Coming in around 1970 or so. That's about when French structuralism hit the lit crit world.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Yeah, I know you know. And I appreciate so much your ability or your tendency, or your skill at direct observation, because you're not defining the world or the art through a screen of Marxist, feminist, Freudian, structuralist agendai. You are apparently, from what I've read, seeing the thing in itself, for itself, or a phenomenological approach of direct perception. But what I originally wanted to ask you about was this slippage between terminologies that you mentioned before that. There's another 800-pound gorilla in the room, and I would say the slippage between the terminology of fine art and craft.
Craft.
And I thought, well, perhaps we could consider the curator's practice to be a craft rather than
I'm glad you
an
asked
art.
that question.
Because a curator is a kind of collage artist, if it's an artist at all. It's a collaging of, you know, combining things within
I don't know.
space.
It's a pretty complex job description, curating, and
Well, I've done a bit too, but
and
I
there
know
is,
it's
I
not
mean,
the
there's a
same as
lot
making art.
there's aesthetics involved in it. I mean, like a good
Certainly.
hanging of a show.
Certainly.
You know, I'm remembering a show, suddenly in my mind, as a show at Guggenheim a few years ago, a Spanish painting from, you know, Velázquez to Picasso. It was like, wow, you know, it's like, and it was like, you know, and it's like every now and then that ramp becomes a kind of a whirlpool that you're caught in, and it's like just, you know, getting epiphanies, like one after another. It's like every painting is being set up to do its best. You know, you don't have to stand in front of it and warm it up. You know, it's just blazing. You know,
And they're juxtaposed and orchestrated so that you perceive them in a specific order.
And I don't,
right?
you know, I don't know how to do that. You know, it's like so that at that level, it's you know, you really do think it's an art. But I think that somebody who does that does not think of himself or herself as an artist. I think they couldn't do it otherwise. You know, I think it's like
That's why I'm saying
it really
a craft?
is. Okay, it's a craft. Well, everything is a craft. I mean, you know, everything you do according to a certain procedure in a certain way. You're acting on the world, on something in the world, even in your head. It's you know, and you know, and I don't know where craft got such a bad rap. I mean, it's the thing is that I mean, modern art, of course, complicated everything. But here's a rule of thumb. I'm sort of jumping ahead, but you know, one of my criteria is everything should be done only and exactly as well as it needs to be. That is, I mean, I think part of it was the hyper craft of like the French Academy, you know, and like academic painting, which is pointlessly skillful. You know, it's like, you know, I mean, how well something is done doesn't really matter if the thing is not worth doing in the first place. Okay, you know, and that you know, Demoiselle d'Avignon or Bonheur de Vivre, you know, by Matisse, I mean, introduced a level that was shocking in terms of craft. But in fact, it made the point that what you want from a painting that is cognizant of history and time and the present, you know, didn't need a lot of fanfare. I mean, that it could be done really simply, really fast. Well, they weren't done really fast. They looked really fast. You know, it's like the emphasis of the craft is somewhere else, and it took a big adjustment of mind to be able to start seeing that. And yeah, but you know, it's that excessive quality is at least as vulgar as ineptitude. This is within the category of taste, the subject of taste. This is where it's all rules of thumb. You know, it's like anytime something becomes a settled rule, then it's in the way of creativity and of pleasure and of surprise. Yeah.
I think we've got to go, Peter.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Darn it.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.